Okay, let's get started on homework number 2. So this is Wednesday night's homework. I have with me my handy dandy reference sheet. Definitely want to use all of these, guys. It is never far from me. Okay, moving on. Let's get started. Okay, I see squares. I'm always thinking identities, but for an identity, it has to be like a single guy by itself. And that's not happening here. So now I'm thinking, all right, let's go sines, cosines, see where it takes us. Okay, so this is going to be sine squared over cosine squared. Oh, well, look at that. That's a good start. That's promising. I'm thinking I'm going in the right direction now. And then here's my sine squared theta up top. This is going to be cosine squared theta. Sine squared theta. Oh, my sines are going to cancel. So it looks like I have sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta. Let's write that. And that's 1 equals 1. Hey, done. That was pretty good. Next is this guy. It's on a terrible angle. I will fix. That's better. Okay. So now for this one, I'm thinking, all right, maybe I will, this to the 4th is kind of throwing me. So now I'm thinking maybe I will factor out, look, I'm going to factor out something common. If I have 4 of them here and 2 of them here, I'm going to pull out 2 of them, see what happens. So cosecant squared theta, I had 4, I'm pulling out 2, that means I have 2 left inside, minus, taking out my entire term, 1 is my placeholder. Can't change this side. My go-to, I kind of want to factor out the cotan squared. Don't do it. You got to leave it. So this side has to become this side. And now where do I go? Well, this looks like a Pythagorean identity, possibly. Let's see. I have something here. Let's check out where the cosecants are. The cosecants and the cotangents, well, that's pretty good. Those guys are in the same identity. Cosecant squared, well, that's 1 plus. I saw that here, so I'm going to rewrite that. So this gets rewritten as 1 plus cosecant squared theta. This guy needs to be rewritten also, so cosecant squared minus 1. Let's see what would happen there. Cosecant squared minus 1 leaves me with cotan squared theta. Okay, let's replace it. Cotan squared theta. Oh, did you see me do that? That's cotangent, sorry. I'm glad I caught that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is distribute, and that leaves me with cotan squared theta plus squared, that's to the 4th, cotangent to the 4th theta. And you know what? I want it to look exactly like this. So I am going to go through the trouble of flipping it around. Associative property, right? Plus cotangent squared theta is equal to side. Check. And I'm happy it's done. Let's move on. Number 20. Okay. There are no squares. No squares. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go sine here. 1 over sine. Minus, and that's going to be cosine theta over sine theta. Well, that's a nice common denominator. I want it to look like this, by the way. Don't touch that side. So my denominator is going to be sine theta, 1 minus cosine. Okay. This sine has to magically become 1 plus cosine theta. That ain't going to happen. So we have to make that denominator happen. And the way that we make it happen is by basically putting it there. So I am going to put it in my denominator, 1 plus cosine theta. Okay, I'm going to multiply that in my denominator. Whatever I do in the denominator, I have to do in the numerator also, 1 plus cosine theta. Multiplying the same thing on the top and bottom is 1. Totally legal move. I can do that. So as I do this, my denominator will look like 1 plus cosine theta times sine theta. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone for a moment. My numerator, oh, need parentheses now, is this times this. FOIL it out. Ready? 1 times 1 minus cosine theta plus cosine theta. Cancels, so I'm not going to bother with anything. Positive times the negative, cosine times cosine. Okay, got to go sideways because I ran out of room. Oh, this guy right here. Well, I just want to make sure I get it right? So I'm going to look over here. 1 minus cosine squared. Well, here's 1 minus cosine squared theta leaves squared theta. So let's replace that and substitute that in. Sine squared theta all over 1 plus cosine theta sine theta. Oh, look, one of these is going to cancel, and it leaves me with a sine all over 1 plus cosine theta. And that's where I was going. And it's equal to itself on the other side. And everybody's happy. Number 22, the final one. Okay. There's a lot happening here. Secants and tangents. Let's take a look. This is where my secants and tangents are. But the way they have it, they have secant squared theta minus a tangent squared theta. Maybe I'll take a moment and I will rewrite this so that it says secant squared theta minus tangent squared theta. And by the way, that would be equal to 1, right, if I move that over. So it's kind of good. The problem is the coefficients are different. So I am going to make this coefficient of 5 because I'm going to split up my secant squared thetas, and I'm going to put 5 of them in the front. So 5 secant squared theta, I'm going to bring this down, minus 5 tangent squared theta, and I'm going to put my other 4 back here, plus 4 secant squared theta, right? Because that together is my 9 secant squared theta. And that's going to, oh, that's a good start. I have this piece. I just have to get the rest of this to turn into 5. We're going to make that happen. Let's pull out the 5. Secant squared theta minus tan squared theta. Hey, we just wrote that that's equal to 1, right? So now plus 4 secant squared. So now we have 5 plus 4 squared theta, and that's equal to this side, and that makes me happy. Oh, last one home stretch. We got this. Okay. If you saw me do the other homework assignment, I did the last one twice. Time depending, depending on the time, we're going to do this one twice also. I have to make it in under 15 minutes so I can upload it to YouTube. Here we go. First thing, I look at this and I can't help myself, but I really want to get a common denominator. So let's do that. So my common denominator, 1 minus cosine theta. So this guy on the right stays the same. So this denominator has to be 1 minus cosine theta, multiply in the denominator and the numerator. And by the way, it's just 1 times that, right? So it's 1 times cosine theta. Oh, this is where we're going. It's always nice to see where you're going. The negative is throwing me a little bit, but we'll figure that out as we go. 1 denominator. Okay, so that's going to make it 1 minus cosine theta. My numerator, oh, that's not bad. So it's 1 minus cosine theta minus sine squared theta. Now, whenever I have a sine squared and I'm adding or subtracting, especially when there's a 1 there, I would be a fool not to look at my identities. 1 minus sine squared, 1 minus sine squared theta. So these two pieces together is cosine squared theta. So there we go. So cosine squared theta. You know what? Let's put that for This is going to be a little bit, play with others. We're going to be okay. Common factor here is going to be the cosine, and it's going to be cosine minus 1. Theta minus 1. Okay, these are opposites of each other. You've seen this before in algebra. You may have only seen it a few times. It might not have been a big thing. Here's the story, Morning Glory. Glance ahead at what you want the answer to be. We want it to be negative, right? So if you take your numerator, let's go with the numerator, and if you factor a -1 out of this denominator, cosine of theta, factor out a -1, then that's going to give you a negative cosine theta and a positive 1, right? Opposite, opposite. 1 minus cosine theta. Well, here it is, the positive 1, the minus cosine theta. This actually does cancel. If you feel better flipping this around, you can. And cosine times -1 is negative cosine theta. Okay, not the way I would solve this one. If you remember, it's the last time we did this, we did it 2 ways. Common denominator is just a little bit lengthier. Maybe instead of that, we can do it this way. And the thing is, which way should you do it? Whichever way you want to. I don't really care. Okay. Cosine. Cosine. I'm going to make that guy cosine too. Ready? Here it comes. Sine squared theta. Okay. Here's my sine squared theta. 1 minus cosine squared theta. That's my new numerator. 1 minus cosine squared theta and 1 minus cosine theta, and that's all equal to this over here. Okay, so now I'm going to get this. I'm going to factor, so it's going to be 1 minus, I'm going to ignore that 1 until the very end. This is the difference of squares. So I split my 1 in 1, cosine theta, theta, and a plus and a minus. My denominator is 1 minus cosine theta, and that cancels. So now what we have is 1 minus, don't lose the parentheses, right? 1 plus cosine theta, distribute, and it's going to be, oh, don't distribute the 1, distribute the negative, sorry. So it's going to be 1 minus 1, negative times a positive is negative, cosine theta. Well, 1 minus 1 is 0, and that leaves you with negative cosine theta. Negative cosine theta. There it is. So, doesn't matter. Lots of different ways to do these. So you just kind of pick one and you go with it, and hopefully you get to the end. If you don't like where you're going, maybe try an alternate way of doing it. You're going to get it. Just takes practice. Have some fun with it.